Okay. Now, thank you, Maurice. Now, recording has started. Now, you can see on the slide that the topic of today's discussion is distance education in Africa, which is part of the course MDE 411 Growth and Philosophy of Distance Education. And this is part of Block 4. This topic is part of Block 4, covering the unit number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This block has 5 units. So, in this during today's presentation, I will try to cover all those 5 units which have been discussed in the block number 4 with the title Distance Education in Africa. Before discussing, let us understand why distance education was adopted in Africa. Can we ask from you people why there was a need of implementing distance education or adopting distance education in Africa? Can anyone tell me one, two, three, four reasons behind that? Why
Let me
distance
start.
education? Yeah, Maurice. Yeah.
Yes, I think the first point is the lack of infrastructure.
Okay.
Lack of infrastructure. Then the second point is lack of enough qualified personnel.
Okay.
And then the increase in number of students.
Yes, increasing number of students. Okay. With increasing population. Okay. Anyone else?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
There is unstable electricity power supply,
Unstable electricity. Okay.
mhm, and there is poor governmental policies.
That is part of infrastructure. What Maurice was saying.
Okay.
See. Okay. There were various issues. No one can deny that. Yeah. You're not audible. So, uh, my point is that if you try to understand the features and characteristics of distance education, you can easily understand that how this was very much relevant and useful for the South, for the Africa, for the whole African world. During the discussion about, on distance education, we have talked about its various kind of features like cost effective, flexible, anytime, anywhere learning, covering diverse kind of learners, requirement of less investment and infrastructure while offering the distance education program. So, after going through all these characteristics, you can easily understand that distance education system has actually were ready to fulfill the requirements of African countries. Those African countries where there was a low literacy rate, people are very less literate. The governments were struggling to increase the literacy rate, and moreover, to increase the literacy rate, there was requirement of a lot of schools and colleges, which were the beyond the budgetary allocation of the many African countries. So if you want to build up schools and if you want to build infrastructure, if you want to build colleges, definitely you require huge infrastructure and funds. So if the people are struggling for a proper meal, electricity and power and water, how you can imagine of setting off a big schools and colleges. So to increase the literacy rate, distance education was a very good option for the government to adopt. So many African countries and governments were of the view that distance education is a system where you need not to infuse or invest a heavy or huge amount of money. You are not required to build a big infrastructure. So distance education became their choice of teaching and learning. Second point, the population were very diverse, diversity of population, women, young group, elders, teachers, teaching in schools and colleges. So how many colleges and schools you are supposed to or going to set up? If you are not able to handle the primary education, how you are going to keep yourself ready to address the requirements of diverse population? Are you going to open the primary school colleges, primary schools, middle schools, secondary schools, senior secondary schools, inter colleges, intermediate colleges, PG and UG colleges? So if you want to impart the education in a very professional way, so obviously you have to set up different kind of colleges for the different kind of people. But the point is that were the governments ready for that? Were they having so much infrastructure and funds to set up those kind of colleges? No. Answer is no. So again, distance education became the first choice to be adopted by different African countries to address the requirements of diversity of population. And another thing which were which was in the minds of African governments, that was Millennium Development Goals. If you want to fulfill those goals, you have to educate people. So far, the African countries has not been able to fulfill the goals of education for all, which was the Millennium Development Goals. So, to, so therefore, achieving those goals and making a respectable place in the Human Development Index, it was very much essential for African countries to adopt distance education so that people are educated and they are able to get some sort of respectable jobs, and so that they can lift their standard of living. The third point which made the relevance of distance education in Africa was that there was shortage of trained teachers. Yes, there were colleges and schools, but who were teaching over there? All the teachers who were engaged in the teaching and learning were not trained. And any kind of global body which are involved in education advocates about making arrangement of adequate trained teachers, not only teachers, trained teachers. If teachers are trained, they can produce better people. So shortage of trained teachers was another reason behind acceptance of distance education in Africa. And dropout at primary level was very high. If the dropout is at the primary level is very high, then how you can imagine that people will be going for the secondary or tertiary education? So to make the secondary and tertiary education more, I mean, attractive, distance education was adopted so that people do not drop at the primary level and they can be in the educational process and the rest of getting the education so that they can join the higher education through distance education without spending so much money and without a lot of, I mean, hue and cry. So these were the few points which were very much, I mean, reasons for making the distance education very relevant for the African countries. Now, as I discussed in the previous slide, one of the reasons was that meeting the Millennium Development Goals. Okay. By educating people through distance education, government were, I mean, optimistic that they shall be able to end the poverty and hunger. They shall be providing able to providing the universal education. They will be able to maintain the gender equality. The child mortality rate was very high. So Millennium Development Goals was of the view that child health should be improved. Again, maternal health, combating the HIV and AIDS, environmental sustainability, and global partnership. These were the some 8 points related to Millennium Development Goals passed under UN General Assembly in 2000. So most of the African countries, I mean other countries as well, were convinced to achieve these parameters, these indicators as per the UN standard. And to achieve these, the first requirement was education. And which education came to achieve these parameters? It was distance education. Okay. Now, some historical perspective. How distance education entered in African countries. Actually, in 2004 at Cape Town, there was a conference of various education ministers of African countries, where Professor Kader Azmal from South Africa, who was the education minister, openly accepted that African countries must go for distance education. Why? Because this system was cost effective and cost efficient. Cost efficient does not mean that it is a cheap. Cost efficient means that you are able to provide the education to maximum number of people with low investment. In conventional mode of education, for example, if you are expending 1 million, you might be able to educate 10 million people through investing 1 million, just for example. By investing 1 million, you are educating how many people? 10 million. In the distance education system, if you are investing 1 million, you can educate 100 million students. Because system is such that there is a multiplier effect. And moreover, we have also discussed about distance education, how it is considered a industrialized form of education, how it is just similar to industries where mass production is happening. So distance education system was addressing a large number of people, large section of the society in a very cost efficient manner. So this was the reason, one of the major reason uh, behind Professor Kader Azmal accepting distance education for the African countries. Then, second point, what Professor Kader said, provision for learning resources. It is distance education system where there is a provision that it is institutions which shall be providing the learning materials to their learners. In conventional mode of education, in face-to-face mode of education, the universities and colleges are not going to provide you the textbooks. You are supposed to purchase those textbooks or learning resources from the market. But in distance education system, there is a provision for learning resources. And this makes this system very popular, especially the countries like African countries, where people feel that yes, besides teaching and learning, they are also going to get the learning resources. Because if you go to buy those learning resources in the open market, that is going to be very costly, and they may not be able to afford those learning resources. So one of the provision for the distance education that it is providing the learning resources was one of the reason behind getting making it popular in distance in Africa. And then lifelong learning. It is distance education where you can join the educational program at any age, starting from 18 years to the till the last breath of your life. So this is the some sort of a venue which provide you an opportunity for the lifelong learning. So these were the 3 points which were highlighted by Professor Kader Azmal, Education Minister of South Africa, during the Education Minister Conference on ODL at Cape Town in 2004. And he strongly advocated and batted for the distance education for the African countries. And after him, it was John Daniel. John Daniel also came out in support of distance education for African countries. What he said? He said that through distance education, you are going to create the human capital. You are going to educate the people. And if the people are educated and if they are having skills, those are some sort of capital, education and skills.
कैपिटल से लिए और ये जो टारगेट
नया वाला
नहीं
23-24 वाला हाँ वही काउंटर करके इसमें आ जाएगा
फाइनल करो
हाँ दे दीजिए And moreover, what he said, it is distance education which reaches to the enormous people. It has no boundary. Anyone, at any age, any institution, in any mode, whether correspondence or distance, online, offline, whatsoever means, can join the distance education system. Widen access to quality learning resources. Whatever learning resources distance education has, it is readily accessible. Education at affordable cost, and it also encourages the independent study. These were the few points given by John Daniel in support of distance education for the African countries. And he also mentioned some elements of good practices in distance education. What are the good practices or elements which distance education has and which makes this system different from the face-to-face education? What he said? He said that course design and development. This is one of the good practices. See, in distance education system, a lot of time and efforts are invested to produce the self-learning material, to design and develop a self-learning material. And before that, there is a process of designing the course, and which is a team approach. A group of people work to design a course or develop the course or design the learning materials and so on and so forth. So this is one of the good practices which distance education has. Then there is a provision for learner support. In face-to-face education or conventional mode of education, you shall rarely find the learner support system or some sort of mechanized system of learner support. But in distance education system, learner support is an integral component of distance education. You cannot think of distance education without the learner support system. That is why learner support system is considered to be backbone of distance education system. And this is the one of the good practices which is being adopted in distance education. And then administration. Administration, you all know, starting from the vice chancellor to the registrar, the deputy registrar, assistant registrar, etc., etc. So everywhere, whether it is learner support or financial aspects or office management, there are administrators who are supposed to play their role. These are the few good practices of uh, distance education, which Dr. Daniel has highlighted. Now, huh, now we shall come to, after entering into distance into African countries, how distance education has contributed. What has been role of distance education in Africa? So I will be discussing about certain areas where distance education has contributed significantly or has played a very important role. One of the important area where distance education has contributed is teacher education. As I mentioned in the previous slides, that there was a challenge of non-availability of trained teacher. But it was distance education which started to provide training to teachers and making them professionally competent. So from the very start, after entering into the South Africa in Africa, the distance education started, or training started for whom? For principals, administrators, curriculum specialists, and policymakers. Through what? Through various distance education programs. Various distance education programs were launched for the teacher education. And it was also need of the hour because the teacher people ratio at that time in Africa, in many African countries, were 1:40. We can see huge gap. One teacher on 40 students. It is injustice. So to improve this teacher people ratio, distance education came up with various teacher education programs in various African countries. And this was also very important because more than 50% of teachers who were working in schools were not trained, they were untrained. So it was distance education who started to give training to those untrained teachers so that teacher people ratio is improved and quality teaching and learning is provided to the school students. And one thing we should also keep in mind that while this was happening, the number of primary school students were very high, and it was growing at a very fast mode. Like in 2000, there were 111 million primary students, which was predicted that it will go up to 151 million students by 2015. So if the number of students is growing, it is quite natural that there will be a massive requirement of teachers as well. So in this context, various African countries came up with the idea to start teacher education programs, and one of the program was NTI, Nigeria Teacher Institute, which was set up in 1978, and they started launching the distance education program for teachers after getting some sort of assistance from the UNESCO. Then another program for teachers was SchoolNet program. This was a multimedia-based program. A very use of ICTs were also there. Okay, so this was role of distance education in Africa. If questions are asked that discuss the role of distance education in Africa, how distance education has been playing its role in providing or strengthening the teacher education in Africa. So these are the points which you are supposed to discuss. Okay. Okay, after teacher education, the another area where distance education has played its roles, that is open schooling. As I mentioned earlier, there was a huge dropout, very lowest, very low literacy rate, and completion was the lowest in the primary education. और यूरोप में क्या था? What was the in Europe? In Europe there was a 90% completion rate, but in Africa there was the lowest primary education completion rate. And out of 45, only 8 African countries achieved this level. And one of the college which contributed, excuse me, 1 minute. Matthews, how are you? Everything is fine? Today we are discussing the distance education in Africa. How distance education reached in different African countries and in what areas, and how it has been contributing.
Yeah, I'm following. I'm following, Doc.
Yeah, yeah. This is block number 4. Okay, okay. This was the open schooling, and one of the prominent open schooling system in Africa was Botswana College of Distance and Open Learning, Bokodol, which was set up in 1998. And this was a system which was working like just IGNU functions. It was operating through different community study centers. Although IGNU's study centers are not community study centers, Bokodol study centers were run by the different communities and which was managed by the regional centers. So this Bokodol played a very significant role in providing school education to a big part of the society, children which were left behind in the educational process. Then, after Bokodol, we can see Namkol, Namibian College of Open Learning. This college also came up very strongly and paved the way for the open schooling system, promotion of open schooling system. And moreover, we should also keep in mind that while these organizations were working in Africa, various international organizations like Commonwealth of Learning, World Bank, etc., were coming up to help the educational initiatives in the African countries. So one of the example is that Commonwealth of Learning has helped to set up a consortium of open school in South Africa. And who were part of those consortium? Botswana, Lesotho, Malawi, Mauritius, Namibia, Tanzania, and Zambia. These were the countries which were part of the consortium. And that consortium was set up in the South Africa. And it is called Open School Consortium of Open Schools. Huh. After that, third area, where distance education contributed is tertiary education. After college, where you are supposed to come, you have to join the university and to offer the higher education to the African students. Uh, University was set up in 1873, University of Cape of Good Hope. Cape of Good Hope. It was set up in 1873. And later on, this university was turned into UNISA, University of South Africa. University of South Africa. And after its establishment and renaming, this university also started teaching through correspondence mode in 1947. Then a task force was set up on African ODL programs because the ODL was becoming popular in different African countries. So government realized that we should review the process. So therefore, a task force was set up. Okay. Then other organizations like UNESCO instituted Institute for CP Capacity Building in Africa. This capacity building institute, which was set up by in UNESCO, was set up in Ethiopia in 1999 for the capacity building of the people working in the distance education system. Then roundtable was organized, which was called ICT Roundtable in Burkina Faso, Ghana, Tanzania, Zambia, and so on and so forth. And gradually, distance education or open and distance learning started to grab the attention and started to becoming very popular among the masses. Therefore, the ODL open distance learning giving the much more importance in different educational policies of different African countries. And ultimately, this policy turned out in setting up of an exclusive open university that was called National Open University of Nigeria Noun. National Open University of Nigeria Noun. Then Tanzania, and then Zambia, Zimbabwe. All these open universities have, these countries have their own open universities. There are many other countries as well which have started open universities. And around 200 institutions in Africa are offering correspondence or distance education program. These were the areas where in tertiary education, where distance education contributed. And now coming to the technical and vocational education. You can see in the slides in 1960s, technical and vocational education training got the paramount importance by the policymakers of the African countries. Then UNESCO International Labour Organization, World Bank supported this program and also provided the various funding to technical and vocational education and training. However, challenges were enormous. But the initiative was very naive and that should were accepted and appreciated by the policymakers. So now I will be moving to the next because time is less. Ah. Now number fifth area where distance education contributed was the adult basic education program. Because getting education is everyone's fundamental rights or basic rights. No one can deny. So if you are able to provide or ensure the adult basic education, because as I mentioned that in Africa, yes, there was demand for education, but there was no institutions to provide the education in a cost effective and a purposeful way. So it was realized that if you want to ensure equity, inclusivity, and if you want to reduce the poverty, so you have to go for the adult basic education program. So this adult basic education program got very popular in the African countries. And you shall be surprised to know that it was women who were mostly benefited from this program. And this adult basic education program was launched through various modes like most important radios. The elders, women and men used to listen radio programs, educational programs. There were various agriculture related programs on radio under adult basic education program. So ultimately, women become the greater beneficiaries, and there was also rise in agricultural production through the adult basic education program. If you are listening to the agricultural program, obviously tomorrow morning you shall be in your farm and you shall be implementing the whatever learning you have had. So it resulted in the rise in the agriculture production. Okay, and 31 projects were launched in Africa under the adult basic education program through distance education. And as I mentioned, this adult basic education program was made popularized through use of radio, especially the community radio. So through community radio, people used to listen the different agricultural programs, so that they got aware about the weather condition, what is going to be crop patterns, where the seeds will be available, what are the various farming practices, and so on and so forth. So this was another area, adult basic education, where distance education came up to play its role. Now, major initiatives. These are the few major initiatives which were taken under the mission of Adult Basic Education Program. You can read out Number one, Ghanaian Literacy and Functional Skills Project. Zambian Radio Farm Forum. Kenya and Uganda Paramedic Training Program. Healthcare workers, print and radio medium. So these were the major initiatives of Adult Basic Education Program. Now coming to challenges. So far I have been discussing about what were the major areas where distance education has contributed. Now coming to the challenges. What were the challenges in distance education? Challenges in Africa which also affected the distance education. First and foremost were the resource constraints. If you are not having funds, if you are not having money, how you are going to bring the learning resources, how you are going to ensure the support services, how you are going to hiring the administrative staff, how you are going to um, hire the employee of to work in the distance education system. So number one challenge was the resource constraints because there were many countries in Africa which were engaged in war. War was going on. So in war situation, uh, there is a massive damage of economic resources and different kind of infrastructure. So rebuilding them is not a very easy task. So African countries, although they were willing to set up more and more distance education institutions, but they could not succeed and set up only a few because of the resource constraints. Then again, infrastructure limitations. If you are given a small piece of land to open a university and government fiscal status is, I mean, very much dangerous, then you cannot demand, okay, I need infrastructure which is limitless, a big infrastructure. So in African countries, there has been infrastructure limitation, lack of infrastructure. So this was another challenge of distance, what distance education faced in Africa. And number third, diversity of African continent. One shot cannot fit all. So we have to take care of diversity or different groups which are associated with those diversified groups. So it was very challenging to implement a distance education because the people were diverse. Few were ready to accept, few were against the distance education. So how it is going to be made possible? So these three were the major challenges uh, about distance education in Africa. Now, how those challenges can be addressed? Those challenges can be addressed through political will and policy initiatives. Now, African countries have started taking bold decisions. They have political will and they have a strong policy making mechanism. So, by doing all these, those challenges were addressed. Leadership and management. Now, different educational institutions in Africa have unique leadership and they are well managing the whole affair of the university or a college. Then, capacity building. Stride and other international organizations have been playing its role in capacity building in South Africa, in Africa, sorry, South, not South Africa, Africa. So this is the another area where interventions are required, where policymakers are required to pay attention. That is capacity building. And last is the interpersonal cooperation. How interpersonal cooperation is going to response, respond to the challenges which was faced before the government. So these were the few challenges. Now next, I will skip this. Now these are the few points which have been taken to highlight how quality can be maintained in distance education in Africa. You can read out these points. Build a common understanding on quality in distance education. You have to reach out some sort of common parameter. Suppose National Open University of Nigeria says that its learning material is excellent among the other African countries and open universities. The people from Zimbabwe Open University or Zambia in Open University will say, no, 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 no. Our learning materials are better than you. So this will kind of problem will keep going until unless we have a common understanding what quality mean and which kind of quality we together we can maintain. So that there is a competition, but there is a healthy competition. Then develop a quality assurance framework. You have to work on. In India, every university has been asked to set up SICA, Center for Internal Quality Assurance. So it is quality assurance framework or mechanism's responsibility to ensure quality at distance education institutions. Regional and international cooperation so that you can transfer the skills and competence. Once the skills and competence is transferred, you shall be able to learn a new thing about some other region. Then institute continuous professional development programs for part-time staff covering all aspects of the. So there should be continuous professional development of whether it is part-time staff or regular staff. Professional development is a requirement of each and every individual working in any organization. So I think these were the few points which I discussed with you all. I will stop here, and now floor will be open for question answer. If you have any doubt and clarification, any addition, welcome. These were the few, major important aspects in Block 4 related to distance education in Africa, which I have presented. request you all to please go through the learning materials what we have provided you, and there the things have been given in a very detailed manner, so that will be very useful. Okay, Matthews, do you want to ask any question?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was following on the relevance of distance education, especially on the point of dropout at secondary, primary, secondary, as well as tertiary education. Now, my question here is, according to the research that was carried and then to come up with this finding, was it the only reason why distance education is started in Africa, or there might be other reasons that are making students to drop out from school in secondary as well as in tertiary school? Because, for example, here in Malawi, where I'm coming from, we have noted that issues to do with school fees is one of the reasons, other than maybe distance education. So I don't know what parameters were used to conclude that a dropout of secondary as well as tertiary education is one of the reasons that contributed to the establishment of distance education in Africa. On what grounds? Thank you.
Matthews, I was not able to hear you because your voice was cracking. Can you write that in chat box so that I can answer? Because your voice was cracking, I cannot hear properly. Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, Doc.
Yeah, Zabidi.
Yes, yes. I think I need just to appreciate the role of distance education, as you have talked about it, especially in teaching. We have a lot of teachers who have been trained through in-service courses through distance learning, and we have seen great improvement in the quality of education as an impact of distance education, because we have well-trained teachers who are able to teach effectively through, I mean, they acquired these skills through distance education. So we need to appreciate distance education. And then the other issue, like here in Zambia, I've learned something from this course that we have an officer, the district education board secretary, who is the standard officer responsible for open and distance learning. Now, the activities that he performs actually are not in line with what we have learned about open and distance learning. So I've learned one thing that I think I also propose to other officers. Thank you very much, Doc.
Thank you, Zabidi.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you getting me now?
No, you're. I think there is a network problem.
All right, thank you.
I don't know from my side or your side.
It's from my side. From my side.
Okay, Usman. Usman.
Yes, sir.
You are working with National Open University of Nigeria.
Hello, sir.
Who is working with now National Open University of Nigeria?
No, I'm not working, sir. I'm not working with them, but I'm close to them.
Okay.
I'm going to the institution, sir.
Who among
I'm
you?
living.
Who among? Okay. Who among you are working with a noun,
No, no,
or anyone working in the ODL system or any open university?
no, sir.
Anyone from you?
No, sir. But I'm close to. But I live close to the campus, sir.
Okay. Okay, then we are going to stop here, and I have one more class. I think day after tomorrow or on Friday, I shall be having that class. That will be last. In that class, I will try to cover the last block of the course, which is block number 5. And the title of that block is Growth and Innovations. Growth and Innovations have, 9 units, but I will try to have, some major units and discuss those units. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye
Yes, sir. Thank
bye.
you, sir.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye.
Have a nice breakfast,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you and goodbye, sir.
Okay. Bye bye.